What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with Tech Daily, and in this video, we are checking out the new Nokia 5.4. This phone has been out for a few weeks now, but it's actually been getting a ton of attention because it seems to be a really great budget-friendly device with a lot to offer. It's got a stock Android experience, better than average camera capabilities, and a price point of around $250. So I definitely think it has some potential. I'm pretty excited to check this thing out, so without further ado, let's go ahead and unbox it and see what all comes inside the package. Sliding off the lid of the box here, the first thing we're greeted by is the phone itself. Right away, it's referencing that dedicated Google Assistant button on the side. And you can see I got mine in this purple polar night finish, which looks really awesome. But it's also available in dusk blue, which is the color on the box. Digging a little deeper inside the package, there are quite a few accessories actually. There's a SIM ejector tool floating around there at the bottom of the package, along with the usual stack of paperwork. There's also your USB-A to USB-C charging cable, and unfortunately just a 10-watt charge brick. That's the fastest speeds this phone supports actually, so a little bit of a bummer there. But Nokia also threw in a pair of earbuds as well. These are super old school, all plastic build, nothing special, but nice of them to at least toss a pair in the box. So with all that stuff out of the way, here is the new Nokia 5.4 once again. And fans of the Nokia brand, I think, will notice that this phone looks and feels super familiar to the likes of the 5.3 and 8.3 even from last year. But we do get a few changes and updates worth mentioning. Physically, the Nokia 5.4 is actually a 6.39-inch device. And the best way I can describe it is it's sort of medium-sized. It's certainly not a compact smartphone, it's still well over 6 inches, but it's also not an oversized, overly tall, stretched out behemoth that a lot of other devices wind up being. I'd argue it's rather comfortable in the hand, and there's certainly a lot less stretching and shifting going on when you use it, though I realize this fit and feel is going to be different for everyone. It's also a pretty lightweight smartphone too, and that's because it is all plastic. Not necessarily a negative thing though, it's what you should expect at this price point. And honestly, I think Nokia does a great job with the finish. Like I mentioned earlier, I really like this purple colorway. It's really unique. The glossy finish kind of gives it a premium vibe, and there's a bit of a dark to light fade and crisscross pattern thrown in as well for detail. All in all, it's a great looking device, I think, and Nokia seems to always think outside the box with their designs and color schemes. Unlike the Nokia 5.3, for example, this Nokia 5.4 also has a little more modern design up front with a corner camera cutout. You still get a bit of a bottom chin with the Nokia logo plastered across there, but with a greater than 82% screen to body ratio, I have no complaints with how the front of this thing looks. The screen itself though is just 720p. It's an IPS LCD panel at a resolution of 1560 by 720 at 269 pixels per inch. And to be honest, I think this is about what you can expect on a phone like this. It's not the sharpest looking screen in the world, especially at this size. You've got some off-axis fade. I think it's also not quite as bright as the Nokia 5.3, but from a normal viewing distance, it's still a colorful looking screen. And I think for most people, it's gonna be fine. It's a great size as well. There's no real distractions. It's just that sort of budget display that I think you'll find on all smartphones in this price range. So keep that in mind. Now, taking a closer look at everything else, there's really not a whole lot that's missing. On the left side, you've got your dual SIM and SD card tray there, which is great to see. Now, underneath that is the dedicated Google Assistant button, which is honestly a kind of surprising thing to have nowadays. I thought we moved past this, but Nokia has stuck with it. And unfortunately, this isn't even remappable or customizable either. You can basically only just disable it. So kind of useless, especially since the Google Assistant is easily accessible with a swipe or tap on the phone anyway. On the right side are the usual power and volume buttons. Up top is where the headphone jack can be found, and down below there's the USB-C charge port and single speaker setup, which sounds pretty decent for what it is. Here's a quick audio sample for you to check out. Now around back, I think this is probably what you're most curious about, that big camera setup is certainly a selling point for this phone. And we'll talk about what all is offered there in just a second. What I will say though is that while it's certainly a big, wide module that takes up a good portion of the rear, it doesn't really stick out too far, at least. Just a little bit of a camera bump, but not too bad. Below that is the fingerprint sensor, and with this, the unlocking speed I think is a little slower to respond than most other devices. There's just enough of a delay where you kind of notice it, but it's good to have this unlocking method anyway. And it's a similar story with Face Unlock 2. It'll get you into the phone, but there's just maybe a fraction of a second more of a wait time than a lot of other phones would have. So let's now dive a little deeper with the camera setup here, because out of everything, I think this is probably where this phone has the potential to beat out other devices in its price range. And I'm really interested to see what this device can do. With the hardware, we now get a 48 megapixel f1.8 aperture main lens, a 5 megapixel ultra wide shooter, and the usual 2 megapixel macro and 2 megapixel depth sensor. Now, none of that is too surprising, and the 16 megapixel selfie camera also isn't particularly over the top, but inside the camera app, I think you'll find there's a lot more to offer here than your average $250 smartphone. Right off the bat, you've got super useful shooting modes and add-ons like night mode, which interestingly enough is still missing from similarly priced devices. With portrait mode, Nokia offers some additional sort of filters and adjustments to give you totally unique looks with the bokeh effect and background blurs. Again, just a lot more here than other devices might have. And for video, not only is there 4K video recording, but there's also a dedicated cinema mode, kind of like an enhanced pro shooting mode where you can film in 21:9 in an H-log format for more control with color grading after the fact. There's even a dedicated cinema editor in the gallery app to edit and enhance your clips on the device. Now, obviously, I'm gonna have to put all of this stuff to the test in my full review. All these features and add-ons are great, but I certainly want to see just how useful it all can actually be and how much potential is really there. But just offering these sorts of camera features on a phone like this is really interesting. And comparing this to the likes of some of Samsung's A-series phones, for example, or Motorola's offerings, there seems to be just a lot more to work with here. With a couple quick sample shots, you can see that the selfie camera itself takes a pretty good result. It's certainly more of an accurate real-world look with the color, but plenty of detail. And while you can enable a beautifying effect, it's not the default profile, fortunately. The rear lens really takes a good-looking shot. It's tough to see here, but there's a ton of detail. And with a portrait picture, the image processing is really solid. The edge detection is on point. Like I said, I'm just really interested in seeing what this phone can handle because there seems to be a lot to offer. Inside, the Nokia 5.4 is powered by the Qualcomm Snapdragon 662 chipset, a newer sort of budget-friendly processor. The choice of either 4 or 6 gigs of RAM and 64 or 128 gigabytes of internal storage. Really nothing too surprising here with the internals. It's about what you'd expect for this price in 2021. What's most interesting though is just the fact that this is an Android One device, so you get a near stock OS experience. There's no Nokia bloatware or pre-installed junk, no Nokia skin. It's honestly a fantastic software experience. And aside from a handful of Google apps you can easily delete, there's next to nothing here you wouldn't want. I think this is one of those things where while the specs are pretty average, all things considered, the seamless and smooth software experience makes things feel almost better than they really are. It's fast and fluid and responsive, and I think this is the user experience that's also a big selling point for the device. Now, the downside is that my Nokia 5.4 is still running Android 10 right now, so even with Android One support, we're still a little behind on updates. Nokia does promise monthly security updates and 2 major Android updates for this phone, I think, so that's nice to see. And all in all, I think this is just the smooth stock Android feel that a lot of people will be looking for that's simply not always found with devices in this price range. Also, powering this phone is a a 4,000 milliamp battery, which is sort of on the upper end of size, and combined with the less powerful specs and well-optimized OS, Nokia does suggest up to 2 days of potential use on a single charge. Now, that might be a bit of a stretch depending on your individual usage, but if you're a lighter user, I think this is certainly a device you won't have to worry too much about with plugging it in. Like I mentioned earlier, the downside really is that 10-watt power brick, but I suppose if you aren't needing to plug it in much anyway, it's not really a huge deal. All in all, I'm pretty impressed with this new Nokia 5.4, at least out of the box here. I think for the price, there's certain elements to this phone that far exceed similarly priced devices. And I think I'm most interested to put that camera setup to the test to really see what it's capable of. I know I haven't always given Nokia a lot of attention, but they've been putting out some really solid, well-priced devices recently, and this one seems to be another great option. So I'm really excited to test it out. So there you go, those are my initial thoughts and first impressions at least on this new Nokia 5.4. What do you guys think about this device? Is it something you're considering right now? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to know your thoughts, of course. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Be sure to follow Tech Daily on Twitter and subscribe to the Tech Daily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.